Okay, well, welcome. It's great to see so many people. My name is Shane McAllister. I'm on the developer advocacy team here at MongoDB, and I'm in this room for today. So look, it's great. We have another session now. Essentially, this is how to get more out of aggregation with a snappy title as well too. And I've just leaned my iPad on your presentation and gone all the way forward. So got you back to the main slide. So we're going to bring up Peter Finch to join us. Peter is a solutions architect with MongoDB. He loves nothing better than to marry real business problems with sensible tech solutions. So I think that's why we've got a crowd here today now. I think that's a good way to go about it. He's based out of London, and he joins us today to dive deeper into the possibilities of the aggregation framework. He'll teach us how to apply advanced expressions to work with arrays and more using real-world examples. And he introduced powerful operators that cut down custom code to reduce the time to data insights. I'm very much looking forward to learning from this too. So please welcome Peter Finch to the stage. Thank you.
Hi there, everyone. It's great to see a full house for this talk. This is my first time at MongoDB World, so I'm really excited to talk to you today about getting more out of aggregation. The idea for this talk came about 12 months ago whenever I joined the company, because we've got all these wonderful ways of learning more about MongoDB, the document model, replica sets, Atlas. And one of the first questions I had whenever I came to the company was, how can I find out more about the data that I'm working with? How can I do more using our rich query expressions and aggregation framework without needing to put data into other tools and sort of dilute my developer experience? And I find the team in MongoDB were really helpful. Shout out to the solutions architects for helping me during the onboarding process. I also found the documentation and MongoDB University were really brilliant resources for just getting started with aggregation. Now, I want to see a raise of hands. How many of you have written an aggregation pipeline before? Basically everyone, yeah. So whenever you want to go to the next level and get more out of aggregation, where do you go to? You've already done the university course. You've already looked at the community forums. How can you do more? And that's what this talk's going to be about, my journey in learning more about the aggregation framework. And we're going to split this talk into 3 parts. First of all, we're going to look at some really cool examples of awesome projects that people have done with the aggregation framework. We're then going to move and pivot onto a more specific talk about powerful array operators and how they can make the most of modeling data with the document model and one-to-many relationships. And then finally, I'm going to put it all together for you with an applied example, and we'll be looking at some really cool ways of using those array operators. So we've got a really exciting talk for you today. So the potential of the aggregation framework, this is something that all developers who work with MongoDB should really be making the most of. Because in today's world, data is as valuable as oil, and being able to extract insights and find out more, get more usage out of the data that's sitting in your MongoDB databases is going to be very valuable in turns. IT teams from just keeping the lights on, serving that operational data, to being actual revenue generators for their businesses by being able to find out those actionable insights from the data by applying complex aggregations to them. And for me, I really discovered the power of the aggregation framework by doing something I probably shouldn't have done with it. Has anyone here heard of the advent of code? Raise of hands. So quite a few. This is my favorite time of year because it gives me an opportunity to learn a brand new technology or programming language. And I would really encourage any of you who haven't heard of it to go and look this up after the session. It's just a great way to apply different programming challenges and technologies to find interesting solutions. And so instead of getting chocolate every day in December coming up to Christmas, you get 2 whole programming puzzles to work out. And so this year, me and a couple of the guys on the team decided we would do the MongoDB Aggregation Framework with Advent of Code. And I set myself the challenge of finishing 50% of them. They get pretty hard towards the end, I'm going to be honest with you. But I was able to complete 30 out of the 50 stars this year. So I was very, very proud of myself. But I would encourage you to go. You can do this anytime of year, not just Christmas. So let's move on, not talk about me so much. There are a couple of things that I saw during my last 12 months at MongoDB that really inspired me at sort of the beauty and the complexity of the aggregation framework, but at the same time, how simple it is. So here you can see a visualization that John Page put on Twitter using MongoDB charts. He's generated a Mandelbrot set using a single pipeline, only 4 different stages and 9 operators. So you don't need to have a really deep knowledge of aggregation to be able to make something that is quite complicated looking. And at the end of the day, what you as developers need to do is understand what tools you have in your arsenal to cut down on custom code and be able to apply those built-in operators to problems in your own industry domains. And so by having an awareness of what's already there in aggregation, it means you're not going to be spending so much time writing custom code, and you can put more on the database server to run. Here's another one that I really love. I'm a bit of a cellular automata nerd. I've made Langton's ant back when I was trying to learn more about the aggregation framework as well. But here's a visualization someone's put on Twitter for the game of life. And this time, again, just a really simple use case where we've only got 2 pipelines, one to create a random seed. If you don't know about game of life, this is essentially modeling how cells interact with each other and evolve over time. And from a random pattern that we create with a single pipeline, using some operators like $rand, we can create a board, and then we can generate each next generation of the game of life. And you can see here, I could look at this for hours, to be honest, but it's something complex coming from a very simple application of lots of different stages and operators. And that leads me to the kind of core of the talk today, which is for both of those use cases, we were using some of the array operators, things like $range, $limit, $in. And if you're using MongoDB, you probably chose us because of the rich document model, where rather than spreading your data across multiple tables and having to join it together, you're able to model those sorts of one-to-many relationships in a single document that's retrieved all at once. And by virtue of having the aggregation framework, we're able to run queries and transform those arrays within the documents using built-in operators. And if you're not using these today, I really want you to go and look at your pipeline, see places where you're using maybe a $unwind to unpick your documents, and maybe consider using some of these built-in array operators in the future. And you can see a full list of those here. I'm not going to go through every single one of them. There are 3 that I want to focus on for today's talk, and those are $map, $filter, and $reduce. And I've chosen these because they are the most flexible and the most powerful of the array operators. Using these, you can implement any of the other array operators, but the others just serve as a shortcut. So it's good to be aware of what's out there, but then whenever you run out of built-in operators, these ones provide that additional power that developers need to get working with their arrays very quickly. And we'll have an example later on of a way that I've applied these to a real-world problem. So start with $map. And if any of you are familiar with functional programming languages and higher order functions, map should be a familiar function to you. Essentially, it will take an array as an input. It will run a particular operation over every element in that array and return a new array as the output. And so for your documents where you've got an array in them, like the one I've got here, this is a very basic document. I've only got 2 fields, but just note the amenities array where we've just got a simple array of strings. And what I want to do here is map each of those strings to a new value. And you can see the syntax for this below. So map, very simply, takes 3 different fields, or 2. The as is actually optional. And the first one is going to be the input field. Here you can say an array expression. So that's either going to be an array that you already have in your document, or you can use some of the other array operators to generate arrays on the fly, say using $range and $size to create an index for each of the elements within your own array. But here I've just taken the simple example of using an array that already exists. Your next field is going to be as, and think about this like a for each expression in code, where you just want to give a local variable name to each of the elements within your overall array. And so I've just very simply called that amenity. If you don't include as, it will call it $this within the in field. And this is where the core of the stage is found. This is the logic that you're going to be applying to each of the elements within the array that will then feed into the new array. And toUpper very simply turns your string into all uppercase, and you can see the output there at the bottom where all my amenities have been capitalized. This is the equivalent in code as this for loop that you can see. So for every position in the amenities array, we can just set that array value to the uppercase version of itself. So sometimes when I'm working with aggregation, I like to think of how I would write this if I was writing it in code, and then translate back and forth. But once you get more familiar with these stages, you're starting to think with aggregations rather than as code, and this will become second nature to you. Moving on, $filter, very similar to the syntax of $map. And this time, instead of a in, we've got the same input and as fields there. But instead of the in, we've got cons, short for condition. And this will just simply take a Boolean expression. And the idea of filter is we're going to take an array, and we're going to cut down the values of that array. So find only things that are relevant. And this is really useful if you, say, modeled your documents to have many elements within the arrays. You can start to cut that down and find only relevant elements to then maybe run an additional map stage on, which is something we'll be looking at a little bit later. So here, what we're doing is we're looking at an equality match for the string length in characters of the amenity string, and we're only looking for ones where that's 7. So quite an abstract example. My apologies for that, but I just wanted to keep it basic just while we're exploring the syntax. And the output from that is just going to be the same amenities array, but we're getting rid of any elements that don't have 7 characters exactly. And then finally, my favorite of the bunch is $reduce. And this is the most powerful array operator by far, because you can implement any of the other $map or $filter functions using this. And it's got a little bit more in-depth operation and some slightly different fields. And so I'll walk slowly through this one because I think it's really valuable if you're able to understand this and apply this after the session today. So with $reduce, we can think of it as a way of summarizing an array of either single values or an array of sub-documents. And the most basic way of thinking about this is I could take an array of strings and create a single string summary of it, which is exactly what this, this example is doing. And what I would say about this is you have to think about it as every element in the array is almost going to be compounded onto the next one until you end up with your final result. So we start by declaring an initial value. So this is going to be the type of data that you want as your return value from the $reduce operator. So in this case, I've got a string. This could be another array. This could also be a rich sub-document. So we could create something quite complex and new off of a single array. That's what we'll be looking at later on. And here we're going to take the in field, and each time we get a new value. So we're going to start with the initial value of an empty string. We're going to take the first value in the array, and we're going to add that to the initial value. And we're going to do that in turn. So if you think about what this $concat's doing, we start with $value, which is equal to the initial value of an empty string. And we're going to concatenate $this. And in this case, if you remember back to map, if we don't have as our array elements are going to default to being called $this in the in stage. So the $this for the first element is Wi-Fi. We add that to the empty string, and then we concatenate the semicolon space to the end of that. And we follow through, we do that to the next stage. So the value of $value on the second element will be Wi-Fi semicolon space, and so on until we reach the end of the array. And using that operator, $reduce, we're able to create a summary of our array, which will look like the amenities list field in that example document at the bottom. So this is just a really quick way of turning an array into any other type of object. We could implement a $map in this case by concatenating the array elements to each other. So the value of $value would be an array, and we can concatenate more elements to the end of it to make a map. We could also add a $cond operator to this to add conditional logic to only concatenate the values if they meet a certain condition. And through that, we would also be able to implement a $filter stage. So you can think of map and filter as just shortcut versions of a $reduce that have specific functionality. Reduce will give you ultimately the most flexibility when you're trying to change your array into either another array or something else. And just to make this super clear, here's the JavaScript version of that $reduce function. And you can see it's actually quite simple behind the scenes. Here we're just iterating through the array, performing some kind of operation, and adding that to our initial value there, which I've just initialized as a separate variable. So that's all of the stages. Now we're going to move on to talking about a real-world applied example. So over the last 12 months working at MongoDB, I've had the privilege of working with a lot of really interesting developers, some really great use cases, and it's been inspiring for me to see all the things they're doing with the aggregation framework. So with that in mind, I've created an example use case that's analogous to some of the things that I've seen. This isn't a real-world use case that I've seen yet, but it is something that is quite practical, so hopefully it provides a good example. I'm sure lots of you are working in different industries. And for today, we're going to be looking at travel reviews for properties. So think back to when you were booking your accommodation for this conference. You might have been using booking.com, you might have been using Airbnb. You will have gone through the process of going onto a website, looking for properties, and then you'll want to be exploring maybe the reviews if you're anything like me. You want to only see things that are 4 stars and above, preferably 5 stars. And so for tech companies, well, all companies are tech companies nowadays, but you're going to want to understand your users and their behaviors, and you'll have all this data already there. You'll just have to use the right tools to be able to understand it better. And so I had a couple of ideas of ways that I could understand the patterns of how users are leaving reviews and how favorable they are versus different characteristics of those users. And we do have, if you go into Atlas, you can set up the sample data set. We do have sample Airbnb data, which is open source. But I've just gone and added a couple more fields to this. So unfortunately, it's not something you'll be able to replicate straight away. But you can easily just randomize some of the numbers and create documents that look a bit like the one we've got on screen here. So my question that I wanted to solve today was, how does the length of stay influence the review scores that users are leaving? So if someone only stays in a property for 1 night, are they going to be leaving a more favorable review versus someone that stayed for a week or a month? I don't know how long Airbnb lets you stay somewhere. I know the longest I've stayed somewhere is a month. It seemed very long. But how does that influence the array score? I was curious how you would solve this and approach this problem with aggregation. And what you actually end up needing to do here is, if you're familiar with the $group stage, essentially what a $group stage is, it will group your documents based on a unique value. So thinking about this not as an array, if you had a review collection rather than a nested array as we do here, you would be doing a $group on the length of stay field, which would then give you a unique resulting document based on every unique value for length of stay. And we don't know what that's going to be up front, because how long is a piece of string? How long is someone going to stay in an Airbnb property for? But we've complicated it a little bit because we've now got reviews as an array, not as a separate collection. So we need to work out how to do a $group stage within a single document with an array. And so this got me thinking, how can I use those operators, $map, $filter, and $reduce to do this? And the result was quite interesting. So if any of you have used Compass before, this is actually shown in the keynote. So everyone at the conference may have already seen this today. But this is just a GUI for MongoDB, made by MongoDB, that lets you explore your data, write aggregations, and it's a really good tool for building aggregations, as we're going to see in a second. So you can see here I've got my documents, which have the reviews array, and each of those have that length of stay field that we're going to try and group on and create the answer to our question of how does that length of stay field influence the score. So we'll go into the aggregations tab, and here we've got a really great builder for aggregations where for each of the stages that we're going to make, we can see the individual input documents from the previous stage and then the results of that stage. So as we're working, we're getting live feedback on what our operators are doing, and it's really good for debugging and writing things, especially if they're new. Typically, if I'm approaching a new challenge with aggregation, I can go and have the privilege of talking to the MongoDB experts within the company, but I might also go to the forum. Someone might have already solved the problem before. Someone might have posted it on Stack Overflow. There are lots of different resources you can use if you come across a problem like this that's new. And you can see if someone's already solved it. But in the instance that you can't find the results and you need to just get pen to paper, I find that coming into the aggregation builder in Compass is a great way of building this up. And the key thing here to remember is don't try and do everything at once. Go step by step. You'll just overcomplicate the problem if you try and bite off more than you can chew. So I'm going to follow my own methodology, and we're going to build up to the solution here step by step and hopefully learn a little bit along the way. So apologies, I'm going to blindside you with a new operator here. This is $setUnion, and this is a great way of turning an array of any length, any number of different variables into just list of unique values from that array. And you can see here I'm referencing from the reviews array the length of stay field, and by applying the $setUnion operator to that, I get all of those unique lengths of stay from our array. So you can see here it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. We could have any number in there, and we're not sort of hard coding in what that's going to be up front. I actually had another example that I was going to show, but I was put onto this challenge by Asya to try and do this $group. So before I was just saying, well, let's find the day of week of the reviews and see how that's influencing score. You know, are people more favorable on a Saturday or a Sunday? But the problem was there, I already knew what those values were going to be up front. It was either going to be a 1 for Sunday and a 7 for Saturday. I didn't need to go ahead and find those unique values dynamically. And so $setUnion saved my life in this case. I could just use that and quickly get the unique lengths of array. And if you remember back to earlier, I mentioned that in the $map stage, you don't just have to use an existing array as your input. We can actually create an array on the fly using the values within the document. And so this is where the $group stage starts to come together within our single document here, where we've got our unique values. And now we need to somehow chop up and create sub-arrays based on what's in that main array and group those documents together that have the same value for length of stay. Everyone with me? Good nodding, yes. So here what we're doing is after our input, so we're going to iterate through the unique length of stays. We're going to not call them anything, so you'll note that as is missing, but later on in the pipeline we've got $this, which is referencing the unique value. In the filter stage we've got as with review, so you can see the $review. So this is where you start wanting to use that as field a bit more when you've got nesting of maps and filters. You'll probably want to be clear on which $this you're talking about at each stage. So just looking at what's happening there. So we're taking each of the unique values of length of stay. We're then filtering the reviews input to get each of the matching elements from the reviews array with that particular length of stay. So what that's doing is it's creating a new array where each value is another array where every document has the same length of stay. So we've grouped those together. And the next step is to understand more about how we can summarize each of those subarrays with all of the same length of stays. And that is part of the group logic. It's not just about gathering everything together. It's also about what you can compute on the fly about all of those documents that share the same characteristics. So what we're going to do is move on to the next stage. We're going to take everything we've got so far, and we're going to drop it into a $reduce stage operator, sorry. And here what we're doing is you can see we've got the same inputs, the unique values. We're going to get an initial value of an empty array. So instead of creating a string here, we're using $reduce to create a new array. And that array is going to be the so-called group documents based on those subarrays with all of the matching documents with all the same length of stays. It's getting a bit convoluted, but this is why we broke it down step by step. And within this, we've got the in stage where we're going to concatenate the current value of the reduce, so starting with an empty array, and we're going to add values to the end of that array. So for each of those sub-arrays with matching documents, we're going to take a note of what the length of stay is. So the $this, that's our length of stay. And then we're going to compute the average score. And in a $group stage, you're going to be aggregating the documents. You're going to be calculating mins, maxes, firsts, lasts. And I've just chosen average as an example for today. We also have the built-in $average operator there, which will take an array as its input, and it will create an output of a value, which is the average of that array. And just note at the bottom of the blue box there, we've got the in from the map, which is just mapping those review documents that we had before. And all we care about now, we don't care about the name of the reviewer, we don't care about their nationality, all we care about is the score that they left. And so we're able to turn that array, map that array of the reviews, and turn that into an array of scores, which we can then average. And that will give us the output there of the group reviews field on the right, where we've got an array of objects, where we've got the length of stay as one field, and we've got the average score as another field. And so in effect, that is how we've been able to implement that $group stage within a single document with an array. So we've solved our problem. We've got more out of our data. And we've learned a couple of really useful things about the aggregation pipeline and array operators along the way. But I didn't want to just stop there. It wouldn't be a aggregation demo if I didn't plug charts a little bit. And so I made just a very basic bar chart plotting those results of how the user's length of stay might influence their review score. And this is completely fabricated data by me. Don't take this as a revolutionary insight into the inner workings of Airbnb, please. But this is what I thought the end result might look like if we were to go ahead and plot that using charts. And that was a simple case of just copy-pasting my aggregation pipeline out of the aggregation builder and Compass and pasting that into the charts interface. So it was a very quick change from looking at documents to looking at nice visualizations that I can share with the other users in my organization. So I've got a bit of homework for you all today. We're very privileged to have the author of Practical MongoDB Aggregations in the room. Thank you for coming, Paul. And we've got a few leaflets at the front and on the tables, which will give you some more information about the Practical MongoDB Aggregations book. This was another really great resource and a very timely one for me when I joined. to learn more about other ways of applying MongoDB aggregations to the common types of data challenges that we see out in the world today. And actually, some of the code summaries that we saw in the slides were taken directly from there. I wouldn't say read it cover to cover in one go. I would say take it slow, just like we do with the aggregations. Take it a chapter at a time instead of your daily Wordle, instead of having a coffee or between Zoom meetings when you've just got 5 minutes. It's very succinct, very well explained, and there's a lot more practical examples in there than what we've talked about today. So you can use the QR code to get that, or just grab one of the leaflets or follow the link to get that. There will be another session on aggregation later on today by Thomas Rücksdies. This is going to be a bit more of an advanced use case, looking at computing some of the fields for faster analytics, and there will be some practical examples of other pipelines there. So if you enjoyed this talk, I'm sure that would be another great way to spend your afternoon. That's everything from me. We're not going to have any Q&A at the end of this session, but please, if you have any questions, things that you want to discuss, I'll be around for the rest of the conference. I'll hang around for a little bit afterwards as well, and feel free to ask any questions. Thank you very much.